welcome all of you in front of the screens, which is our new reality now for these any kind of meetings in Europe. My name is Uwe Gartenschläger. Very sorry for the very difficult German name. You don't have to remember. I am the president of the European Association for the Education of Adults, and it is my pleasure to be your facilitator this afternoon. We have a very ambitious agenda, so I would like not to lose too much time, but I have to share with you some technical information. First of all, I think you all recognize that your microphones are muted by the organizers. They will be unmuted only in the case that we will give you the floor for a question or a remark. Participants are allowed to ask questions in the chat. You're even welcome to do this, and there will be somebody who watches, have a glance on the chat and will table your questions in case we will have time. I'm afraid there won't be too much time for questions. This meeting is recorded, so if somebody does not want to appear in the recorded, please turn out your camera. And the last thing is that we would like to ask you, for the sake of a better communication, to type your correct full name into and the name of your organization into the Zoom shows. You can do this if you move the cursor to your own picture, then click on the three dots in the upper right corner and then rename yourself. Because it would be a bit difficult to call somebody, I don't know, iPad 352. So with these few technical remarks, I would like to give the floor to Sirpa Pitikainen, who is our host today, for her opening remarks. Sirpa.
Thank you. And I just wave you very quickly. Hello, so that you know that I'm not a bot, I'm a human being. And with your permission, I just shut off my video connection because my line is so bad that I will be sort of cut off anyway, quite probably sometimes. And if I have the video connection, that happens all of the time, and that gets on my and I guess on your nerves too. But welcome wholeheartedly on my behalf on lifelong learning groups discussion panel about the European new educational area and what is planned there and what we wish to see there. And we have a quite sort of an impressive list of panelists and speakers, so I will not consume too much of the time, but leave it for the panel discussion. But there are a couple of points what I would like to underline for our discussion. Firstly, like in the areas of taxation or health, in the area of education, we do need more Europe. Because if we do not harmonize more, integrate better, and increase resources and straighten up or raise the standards of education in European level, we cannot succeed, and we cannot guarantee the people the qualities of life and the adequate understanding to have the impact on their societies in one hand, and secondly to have a proper jobs in future, and better jobs also maybe somewhere else than then their home member states. And so that is point number one. And always what we think is best, for example, I'm coming from Finland, in our country, doesn't prevent from learning the others. And we have a very good examples about the European University, and indeed at some point I think that we would need to have a common, at least one European university with the whole curricula. But this needs to happen in professional education and in all levels of the education gradually. And then the second point is the lifelong learning concept that is very dear to us. Because if we do not promote it together, and if we do not bridge the gap between the work and the programs in the work side and the professional qualification and the gap on education and education area, we cannot guarantee the proper and best lifelong learning and that kind of educational passports that would show the capacities. And we cannot make the full benefit of the beautiful examples what quite a lot of the lifelong learning experts are doing already, how we can integrate different kinds of educational systems for different kind of learners. And we know that on the other hand, we have extremely talented people, and on the other hand, we need people with low qualification in basic skills and sometimes societal or mental challenges or background challenges. And then different kind of learning, community-based learning has proven to be very effective to raise up the basic skills and professional skills and guarantee the possibilities for work. So the different ways of learning needs to be there. And also, and that is my third point, what we would need to be working is the European pass, the European educational pass. And what I mean by that, it is would be some sort of certified LinkedIn. And now, of course, in the LinkedIn, we can all put our courses, what we've mastered or what we've learned in different workplaces, but it lacks the effective creditability that would certified platform Europass in education have. Because if my assistant, by the way, would say that while working in my office, she has mastered new digital skills, for example, then it would be endorsed by me and I would be liable on those sayings. And that's why then the next one who recruits her or him could rely that this really has happened. And then this kind of a sort of verified pass where you can add all your lifetime, the courses that you were entered, the books you have read if necessary, the learns and skill, the issues you've learned in workplaces or in the third sector, because you can learn quite a lot in third sector and voluntary work too, and the different skills that you master and you have proved at some place wherever this learning would have happened. Then last but not least, the question is, how do we put forward these initiatives and a couple of the other initiatives and the whole European educational area that would need much more attention, resources, and heightened up funding in our member states. With these words, I'll once again wholeheartedly welcome you to this session. And now I'll turn to the panel discussion. And for our moderator, Uwe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sirpa, for this rich introduction and pointing already on a few aspects in the European education area. I'm sure we will discuss deeper now with our eminent panelists. So our issue today is to look with a lifelong learning lens on the new European education area communication. And I would like to introduce to you our panelists one by one. And we will start with Janine Costa, the representative of the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union. As Ms. Costa has to leave us a bit earlier, as I was informed, I would like to give you the floor first, Ms. Costa, to share with us your thoughts. We agreed beforehand that this first round will be 5 minutes available for each of the panelists. So Ms. Costa, the floor is yours.
Many thanks. First of all, I would like to thank the invitation to join this session of the Lifelong Learning Interest Group of the European Parliament and to take part of this panel to discuss a very important issue for the education and training sector and for all of us, the achievement of the European education area. In the Rome Declaration of March 2017, European leaders pledged to work towards a union where young people receive the best education and training and can study and find jobs across the continent. The European Pillar of Social Rights proclaimed by EU leaders at the 2017 Gothenburg Social Summit establishes the right to quality and inclusive education, training, and lifelong learning as its first principle. And then the European Council conclusions of December 2017 put education and training at the heart of the European political agenda for the first time. The Commission, together with member states, but also all relevant stakeholders as the European Parliament, have carried on a lot of work and put many efforts at national, but also European Union level from 2018 onwards to make these aspirations a reality and setting the stage to the establishment of the European education area. And well, new steps are in front of us. The communication on achieving the European education area by 2025, presented on the 13th September, outlines Commission's proposals on how European cooperation can further enrich the quality, inclusiveness, and digital and green dimension of the European Union education and training systems, and also how member states can shape a European education area by 2025, together with the European Commission and relevant stakeholders. I would like to highlight these two main elements behind the European education area communication approach. First, the need to strengthen the European cooperation and in education and training, and two, to put in track a co-creation process between Commission, member states, EU institutions, and relevant stakeholders in order to achieve the European education area. Well, for the last 2 decades, we have been successful within the strategic framework for European cooperation in education and training in providing the opportunities to build best practices in education and training policy, but also in gathering and disseminating knowledge at the European level, and in advancing educational policy reforms at the national, but also regional levels. The current strategic framework that we have called Education and Training 2020, based on a lifelong learning approach, a foundation and crucial element of the framework, addressed outcomes from early childhood education and care to higher education, including vocational education training and adult education, and covered learning at all contexts, the formal, the non-formal, and informal one. Moreover, ET 2020 contributes to improving European education and training policies and helps set the stage for the European education area. The new framework for the European cooperation in education training now needs to be established within unprecedented circumstances. The context of COVID-19 that triggered a drastic shift to online and distance teaching and learning, bringing different challenges and raising several obstacles to the EU education and training system. a new strategic framework that will enhance the further development and implementation of the European education area as its main overall political objectives, and will contribute to put in track a co-creation process towards the achievement of the European education area with the involvement of all relevant stakeholders. National authorities, public administration, main actors of the education and training sector at national but also European Union level, and experts and academia. A new framework for the European cooperation in education and training that will use the major elements of the European education area communication. Well, although the European education area communication addresses in the right way, even further and deep discussion are needed. I was saying addresses all the main issues, dimensions, means, instruments, including governance and monitoring mechanisms to concretely achieve the European education area by 2025 and beyond. It appears that a broadened holistic approach is missing within the EA communication, within a lifelong learning approach, and that in several elements of the communication. And that is an issue that needs to be tackled. Well, next steps will be taken more concretely in next months, and in particular under the incoming Portuguese presidency, to move forward in order to achieve the European education area and to establish the next strategy framework for European cooperation in education and training. For that, we truly believe that relying on the collaboration of all of us, member states, Commission, education and training sector and its main actors, relevant stakeholders at European Union and national level, such as, well, the European Parliament, within an effective co-creation process, we will be able to shape the European education area and to frame our European cooperation in education and training for the next years. I will then stop my first intervention. I hope that it can take the stage for the debate, and I will very, very sorry not being able to follow this session. I'm quite sure that my followed colleagues from the panel and the other debates that you will have afterwards will be very, very interesting. I'm so sorry not be able to be with you, but I remain at your disposal for further discussion and perhaps because we will indeed tackle the issue of European education area within the establishment of the next European cooperation on education and training. We will be able to then, and please feel free to contact us so we can have other kind of discussion and debate around those two themes that for us, for the trio of presidency and of course for the Portuguese presidency is of the utmost importance. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Costa, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us and to express the need to strengthen both cross-border European cooperation and also cooperation between the various stakeholders to reach our goal of a holistic lifelong learning education system, which I dare to agree with you that there is still a long way to go. And coming from a country where even national cooperation in education is a challenge, I feel how difficult it is on the European level. Next, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Maxova. She is a member of the European Parliament, of the Cult Committee. I guess so also in a way very closely linked to our host. So Ms. Maxwell, the floor is yours, and I have to remember it's 5 minutes intervention in the beginning.
Thank you for the floor. Dear colleagues, I try to keep time, I promise, but we will see. Thank you for organizing a webinar and for invitation on such an important and interesting topic. Only with good education we can ensure a good future and prosperity for the EU and for the next generation. When thinking about education, we often think about our children and youth, but especially with the continent growing older, we have to think about providing quality education to our adults and seniors. Unfortunately, so far, the EU and the member states have not given such much focus on this topic. Even so, there are many clear advantages. Through quality education of seniors, we can ensure their inclusion in evolving society, increase their active lifestyle, prevent diseases, and what is nowadays especially important, fight the spread of disinformation. The Council recommendation from 2018 sets out 8 main competencies for adult learning: literacy, multilinguality, numerical, scientific, and engineering skills, digital and technology-based competencies, interpersonal skills and the ability to adopt new competencies, active citizenships, entrepreneurships, and culture awareness and expression. The European education area, while mentioning education as a lifelong learning process, it does not especially target elderly. This, I believe, is very unfortunate. We should strive for a more organized and structured elderly education and for more cooperation and support on the EU level. It is not only about enabling our elderly to participate in education and to increase their potential. We have to make sure that the education is well suited for them and will bring them actual practical benefits. The content should be therefore focused especially on practical issues. Digital competencies, media literacy, and resiliences to disinformation are just a few topics which importance has been highlighted by COVID crisis. The format of the education has to be adapted as well. The lecture have to be easily accessible and understandable for the elderly. That is why we should have a clear structure for sharing of best practices and a permanent platform where both education institutions as well as adult learners could share their experience. The member states should also consider involving elderly education in their formal education structure. To finish with good examples, the EU has to set several structures to support adult learning. There is a new working group on adult learning, as well as new electronic platform for adult learning in Europe that provides an online space to exchange and promote best practices in adult education. Finally, I would like to use this opportunity for a little bit of self-promotion. Next week on the 7th of December, I am organizing a webinar on exactly this topic, empowering European seniors with lifelong learning opportunities. There will be guests from European Commission, heads of Association of Universities of the Third Age, as well as of Federation of Learners at me and my Renew colleagues, and also Lifelong Learning Platform. I will be more than happy to see you there. Thank you for your time, and I am looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell, and thank you for perfectly respecting the timeline. Yes, I totally agree with you. We have to look on our continent also with the lens of a older generation, and we have to make sure that everybody is still on board and nobody left behind, because for democracy and for the coherence of our society and economy, it is essential to work with everybody and not just to think in the 19th century thinking that education is for children only. As a representative of adult education, very happy to hear that, and we hope very much that Commission will come up also with a new adult education agenda very soon based on the life skills concept. Our next speaker is Mr. Carlos Scalotti, Senior Expert on Skills and Qualification in DG Employment. Mr. Scalotti, the floor is yours for, as I said, 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting us to be part of this meeting on the European education area. Well, of course, I represent here the Director General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. And as you know, we have in July this year released a package which included the skills agenda. The skills agenda is closely interlinked with the European education area. In fact, you will notice that there are some actions which overlap, which are presented in both. These go on the one hand, both initiatives need to cooperate and to cooperate with other European initiatives, but they also need to be coherent in themselves. And neither of these two initiatives would have been complete if they hadn't included, for instance, a mention of a European university as an action to be pursued in order to achieve the objectives. Neither of the two would have been complete without mention of the on the Digital Education Action Plan. So that's why these are present in both. But then what I really want to stress is really the need to consider both of them as part of a wider coordinated strategy, which includes other initiatives at European level. I would quote at least the European research area and the European industrial strategy and the strategy for small and medium enterprises. And of course, other European acts has been very important in the definition of the European education area and skills agenda. Think of the European Green Deal, which is one of the major priorities of the current Commission. And it should be, because of course the climate challenges have become so strong and so visible and so apparent that we really need to do something at European and national and at local level, even more at local level. So it's obvious that they have been very much reflected in our policy frameworks for skills and education. And if it's responding to the green transformation and responding to the digital transformation are red threads of both the European education area and the skills agenda. Of course, it's easier, you say, to do these behind your desk and to write policy frameworks that are coherent between them. The point is now to put all of these in practice and to be able to have a coordinated implementation of the different action mentioned in both initiative and in the other related initiative. It may be challenging, but I'm quite confident that we will be able to reach this coordinated implementation. This will, of course, demand a huge effort from member states, because at the end, education, training, and lifelong learning, which are the first principle of the European pillar of social rights, are largely in the hands of member states. We can't say that they're totally not European competencies, on the one hand, because the Treaty of the European Union, since the beginning, mentions the European vocational training policies. but also because as things have evolved, it has become very clear, think only of the Erasmus program, that action at European level has a strong impact on education and training. So, said that this will really ask for a huge effort from member states, VP level, and from all possible stakeholders, from education and training providers, and from different bodies. And the huge role will be played, of course, also by civil society organizations. So that's why I'm quite satisfied that this meeting is being organized by the Lifelong Learning Platform and with the strong involvement of the European education associations, because the role of association will be really fundamental in trying to reach out to all those who need to improve their skills. Now, I don't want to use too much time, so stop here. I'm sure we'll have other occasions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Scatoli, and thank you for reminding us that we should not sink into silos, but try to build bridges in cooperation with research, industry, and small, medium enterprises, as well as the concept of the Green Deal and the questions of ecology. I think that's essential for education, which has the task to equip the people to think and act transformative in the next decade. So this can't be done in a vacuum, but only in connection with the surrounding world, as you mentioned. Our next speaker is Tatiana Mabroskin, member of the European Economic and Social Committee. Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear me. We can hear
sorry.
you well.
Sorry. Because sometimes I don't know for what reason it doesn't work.
Yes. No, perfect.
Well, actually, it was very interesting to listen to the other panelists. And I was thinking about all these plans and strategies. But when you see how COVID-19 pandemic had clearly shown that learning itself can and could actually quickly adapt to changes and circumstances. So we don't need any reform. Learners developed many new approaches. Teachers, trainers updated their skills or gained new skills how to teach. So this is unprecedented, I don't know, maybe a kind of reform or let's say break in education. And when life returns to normal, I think society should draw lesson from this process and fast e-learning experience and continue to develop these approaches and skills. So when I read the questions, I was thinking what is missing actually to move forward. And the first thing which came to my mind was investment. Member states should increase public investment in lifelong learning and with a special focus on the education of adults. Because definitely, as someone said, education is not just about children. And of course, we should target funding for the continuous upskilling and reskilling for the most vulnerable groups in society. And amongst these groups of vulnerable people, and unfortunately, we see women and young girls. And speaking about the skilled labor, Europe will also have to look beyond formal education and allocate more funds for learning in a non-formal and informal setting, for example, in youth organizations, in various organizations, and support them also via media, via different new forms which are appearing now. And I think that the learners can develop their soft skills, such as critical thinking and teamwork, or character traits such as leadership, curiosity, etc. I think this is something what is needed, what is employers also flagging that they need. It is increasingly recognized that as well as basic literacy and digital skills, people will need the soft skills to adapt to the impact of global digital, green, technological developments, and also advantages which it brings. According to current estimates, within 5 years, half of the current workforce will need to update their skills in order to survive on the labor market. And I want to underline the focus on social and citizenship competences, which are crucial for every individual as a democratic citizen. Citizenship education should be accessible to everyone. Unfortunately, it's not the case. It's not in the focus in many education systems. And as a precondition, member states should implement the Council recommendation on promoting common values and also to strengthen learning about European values and identity in that and adult learning sectors. I think this is something which is the preconditions to the development of European education area. So I stop here. I know that I take a lot of time, but I'm ready to answer the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mabroskin. I think it's perfect with the time, and thank you for reminding us the long journey we went the last months with adopting to the new reality. And I tend to agree with you that many of the educators did a great job, although the circumstances were not always very favorable for all of us. And I like your notion that we need education both for upskilling for new jobs and for citizenship education. I think this is the kind of holistic Ms. Sirpa-Pietikäinen talked about in the beginning. The last speaker in our for our first round is Una Aitken from the Lifelong Learning Platform Steering Committee as a voice of the civil society. Una, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to make a short statement on the panel today. As you said, Uwe, I'm representing civil society and specifically the Lifelong Learning Platform. So I'd like to just make a few general points about the European education area and our reaction to the Commission's proposal. First of all, of course, we welcome this wide-ranging vision for European education and training, and especially its synergy with the European Research Area and the Digital Education Plan. It's important for us that the European education area is seen as a major contribution to the achievement of a greater social Europe. If we are truly to build a sustainable future for all European Union citizens, then everyone has to have the right to quality and inclusive education and training so that they can fully participate in society and acquire the skills that allow them to enter the labour market. To achieve a holistic lifelong learning approach, we need more synergy between sector policies and less focus on formal education. We would like, for example, to see the links between the new skills agenda and the European education area strengthened. As the Lifelong Learning Platform said in our reaction to the Commission proposal, evolution, not revolution. Why not build on past achievements? And I think the previous speaker mentioned this. The importance of basic and transversal skills is stressed in the new proposals. We welcome this, but let's build on the Council recommendation on key competencies of 2018. 5 years is an ambitious time frame, and it will have to be accompanied by equally ambitious investment. We would like to see the recovery plans invest in education and training for everyone, no matter their age or economic circumstances. I'm sure that Erasmus Plus and the European Solidarity Corps will come up elsewhere in our discussions today, but we believe these two programmes need major investment if they are to become truly inclusive. To continue just for a moment on the theme of inclusion, we need to invest so that everyone begins their lifelong learning journey on an equal footing. We've seen, and it's been mentioned already today, how the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the digital divide. We need equity of provision. The Lifelong Learning Platform in its 2019 position paper, 21st Century Learning Environments, urges flexible pathways to support people in accessing and moving across learning pathways, in accordance with their needs and regardless of their age or background. We hope that the European education area proposals and implementation will equally value different learning environments. We welcome the focus on volunteering and non-formal learning as ways of acquiring professional, personal and life skills. And I'm particularly interested in this area myself, given that I'm also president of Volunteerop, the European network of volunteer organising organisations. The validation and recognition of these competencies and skills should be reinforced by support for volunteering platforms in all European Union states. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, and again, it's been mentioned before, this is what comes of being the last speaker, the European education area should be co-created with civil society and with education and training providers and stakeholders on the ground. We welcome the enabling framework and proposed governance, but there must be a place for civil society at that table as real partners. Many thanks indeed, and I look forward to answering questions and taking part in the rest of the debate this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Una, and thank you for your intervention, pointing especially on the right to education and the idea to leave no one behind, to have an inclusive education, especially challenging the digital divide. I have a question to the panelists concerning that nearly all your statement, you talked a lot about coherence, cooperation, working together on different level in different areas between the local, the regional, the national and the European level. What should be done and what can you do to strengthen this kind of cooperation and cross-sectoral coherence, which at least, forgive me, what I see is not so strong at the moment, the thinking in silos and thinking to defend your own position, your own rights on the different constituencies is quite strongly developed. So what could be done to strengthen cooperation and to strengthen policy coherence in the education sector? Maybe I would like to invite Ms. Maxwell to start giving a short feedback and share her thoughts on that.
Short feedback. What will you do to make European education? One of the main things I am able to do is to mainstream the idea that education does not end with childhood and should be a lifelong learning process. With my colleagues from Renew, we are striving to ensure that European education area serve all and empowers even our older part of the society through implementing mentions of lifelong learning into any education-related documents.
Thank you very much. Mr. Scalotti, what is your thought about cooperation? I mean, you strengthened especially the links to the research and the economy.
Yes, the point is that, as I said, is relatively easy to cooperate in the phase of preparation of the documents. Of course, both the skills agenda and the European education area, both communication were drafted to a large extent jointly with very close exchange between the two responsible Directorate General. What is really challenging is to be able to put these on the ground, to be able to reach joint implementation. And now it looked like a bit like sort of blaming member states if there is a lack of cooperation, but of course it's not. We understand that at national level is also very difficult to be able to join all the different forces which are necessary to achieve the objective that we have set for ourselves. So I don't think that we can, that there will be any single intervention or action that may change this. It's just a matter, I think on the whole, that we are on the good way. I mean, I'm not the youngest in the club, and I have seen that cooperation is much more effective now than it used to be 20 or 25 years ago or more in the area of education and training, together with labor market actors. And the fact there is, for instance, I just read this morning a couple of national plans for the next European Social Fund period. And in both there was a strong emphasis on the need to make education and training providers and business work together. So I think that there are many signals of a certain change in attitude, which is really needed. Now, Una mentioned that sometimes we talk about evolution rather than revolution. Well, in fact, the final paragraph of the European Skills Agenda really calls for a skills revolution. Because the skills challenges that we are confronted with really call for a revolution in the way we look at them, also in the way we look at our objectives. After we published our objectives in the skills agenda and the European education area, we had many comments such as these are very ambitious objectives. I don't think they are. I mean, the real objective, for instance, for early school leaving is not 10%, it's 0%. This should be our real objective. And for adult learning is not 85%, it should be 100%. That also depends, of course, on what we consider learning. Not everybody may participate in informal learning, but everybody certainly learns, develops skills, and they should be recognized. So, of course, there is need for cooperation, but putting together all these different threads is really challenging, and it will take time. I said things have improved over the last 20 years. Here to 2025, they might still improve, but it will not yet be the revolution that we have been calling for.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this optimistic note, not to wait another 20, 25 years, but to work on it and be on the way for more cooperation. I saw in the chat a comment from Pete, I'm not sure about the Katzi Michael, asking for more cooperation within the education providers, formal and non-formal, vocational and non-vocational. I think I tend to agree that this is what we can do, and to turn down the walls, especially between vocational and non-vocational, because in a way this is a bit old-fashioned as well, to think this one is only vocational and this is non-vocational. The next I would like to give Tatiana Mabroskin the opportunity to react on the question on what can.
Yeah, it's exactly what's my point, what I wanted to say. I think that it should be policy level and implementation level. When these two levels are meeting, when they understand each other, when there are bridges between these two levels, then things might work. I look at the house where I am now, is the European Economic and Social Committee. We have unions, we have employers, we have various interest groups, and also there are some of them, there are providers also involved into education. I mean, there are different people, and they're linked to this policy level, and also at home, implementing things, what they're saying here, or they're bringing their opinions to. And sometimes I feel strongly, and it's in many areas, it's not only in that and adult learning, it's also higher education, it's also all, if you look at the education from the holistic perspective, all levels of educations are missing these bridges between policy and implementation. And that's why we are stuck usually. But that's why COVID is a better facilitator, unfortunately, than all our strategies.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think we need more of this kind of facilitators in the future. Maybe we better do on our own. There are two. I think this topic about collaboration and coordination is very attractive in the chat. There are several comments already on this. Do we think that coordination and cooperation should be also with other intergovernmental bodies like the Council of Europe, OSCE, UNESCO? Should we collaborate on the design of a holistic teacher training program? I think with working together from different areas and institutions, this is highly needed, writes Jose Gijon from ATEE. So there is a lot of, and somebody agrees already with this from Euroclear, so there is a lot of coherence and cooperation needed. And I think Una Aitken will explain us now how we can come forward with all this.
Really? I've got the solution to all the problems. I was really just going to agree with what people have said. I was just picking up on the cooperation between intergovernmental bodies, DGs, civil society, member states. Yeah, of course, we need cooperation from all of these bodies. I think what the Lifelong Learning Platform can bring is that coordination of all the providers. So we're kind of uniquely placed to have formal, non-formal, higher education, VET, learners, students, teachers, all of these people in the body of the Lifelong Learning Platform. And I hope in terms of implementing the European education area that we can have all these voices heard through our responses to the Commission proposals and so on. And I couldn't agree more with the comments about teacher training. I can remember very well when I trained as a teacher about 300 years ago now. It was purely the subject teaching for the secondary school, and there was no mention of any other sectors or any bridges that you could build between these sectors. So I think the idea of a kind of cross-sectoral teacher training program is a brilliant one. So I don't have all the solutions, but I think the Lifelong Learning Platform can bring some of the solutions to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Una. And this bridges very well to the few asking for interventions from civil society organizations we received before. As the first one is from the Association for Teacher Education in Europe. I have to remind you that the interventions are agreed on 2 or 3 minutes maximum. So may I ask the representative from the Association for Teacher Education in Europe to share with us your thoughts.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Agnieszka Splitz, and actually I would like to emphasize that the main ideas that I planned to present have been already mentioned. But as for the teacher education in Europe, we may consider the new strategies of teacher education. So first of all, the new goals and the new aims appear. Especially, we need to focus on autonomy of teachers and self-directed learning. So these are the skills that should be approached in a new way. And one of them is for sure the community of practitioners. And I absolutely agree. And I think it has been mentioned also. We need to build real platforms for building communities of practitioners. But it must be mentioned that the community must focus on some good or examples of good practice, and it has to involve some teachers who stand by the tables, who have some real life problems. So of course the research-based knowledge and description of learning and teaching projects and teaching or learning processes, it's highly important. But a good idea would be to come to the bottom of the process, to give the voice to teachers who have got some real problems. So that's all for me. Thank you. And also,
Thank you so much for the intervention and the interesting idea to how we can bring the teacher education more forward with a more holistic idea of cross-sectoral and lifelong learning. Our next intervention comes from EMDR Europe, and I was informed that you presented a short presentation. You're welcome to do so, but I have to remind you about the 2 minutes we have for every intervention. So sorry.
Yes.
So
No
the floor
problem.
is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. So I would like to talk about the intervention, the psychological support intervention with EMDR for healthcare workers during COVID-19 emergency, because we noticed that healthcare workers were exposed to a high level of psychological stress due to many factors, managing patients at the same time, the fear of being infected and spreading the infection, the high mortality of patients and colleagues that they witnessed, and the need to provide at the same time emotional support to patients in isolation. And all this also leading to discrimination and stigma that they had to face. The consequences of psychological stress can lead to burnout, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and also physical issues. And if stress symptoms are left unaddressed, they often don't improve. So the impact on social, interpersonal, and occupational functioning for those who develop PTSD and other issues like this is very big. But this impact can be reduced if we promptly address stress management and self-care. How did we do that? We organized specific training. We trained staff of National Health Service in early intervention and psychological support. We organized helplines, EMDR group sessions, and the dissemination of helpful resources and materials on stress management. What we noticed is that we needed to carry out a continuous work of outreaching because the pandemic hindered the requests for help. So healthcare workers were in need of psychological support, but they weren't looking for it. And after helping them, they said that this strengthened their sense of community. They were feeling like a family, basically. And the helpful resources of stress management that we disseminated were videos and also psychoeducation material that they could use to understand what was going on and what they were going through. So lesson learned and priorities that we identified in this work, we identified these new psychological needs in healthcare staff. Support was needed. We offered psychoeducation and other initiatives, but the priority is to keep on working with them, training them and supporting them. It would be ideal to have a partnership with public services and local communities, and it's also fundamental to raise people awareness about the importance of having psychological support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and my compliment for keeping the time with the presentation. That's a good skill, and I think it is very good you reminded us that if we talk about education, we should not talk about only knowledge and skills, but also about the human perspective and the personal development and well-being. And what you presented to us, I think, is targeted on a specific group which was affected very much by the crisis and which needs these kinds of support, which I agree is a part of our education area as well. The next one who asked for a short intervention is Euroclio.
Okay, I should be unmuted. Hello everyone, I'm Alicia Modena from Euroclio, that's the European Association of History Educators. I had prepared a whole 2 minutes intervention, but half of the things that I wanted to say have already been tackled. So I'm going to limit myself to 4 points that, four things that I found striking in the European education area's communication. The first is, and I already mentioned it in the chat, is the mentioning of new synergies and the importance of cooperation. And what I found striking there was the fact that some programs, especially of course some EU programs and some key stakeholders were mentioned, but some others were not. And I found in particular striking that the Europe for Citizens programs was not mentioned, as well as intergovernmental bodies such as the UNESCO or the Council of Europe. because we find it a little bit risky not to explicitly acknowledge that there's other bodies that act on education in Europe, because we believe there would be a risk of the replication of programs and projects as opposed to the building on what's already there. So as was already mentioned, a little bit less evolution than what would be possible. And the other three things that I found a little bit striking was the little to no recognition of current events that I believe impact education and society at large a lot. Of course, COVID has been recognized extremely, but I couldn't find mention of the recent call for the decolonization of education. So they need to represent perspectives that are not part of mainstream education now. And the prevention of radicalization, especially the Paris Declaration, I don't believe is mentioned. As well as, and I mean, we're the European Association of History Educators. There is no mention of the humanities as a key subject to promote democracy and active participation. There's a lot of focus on STEM, and it's been like that for some years. So we're kind of used to it, but you know, it's a missed opportunity in this moment. And finally, and I know the time is up, finally, inclusion and diversity. I just come from a focus group on inclusion this morning. And I think that inclusion and diversity in the European education area at the moment, there's a great attention paid to gender equality and inclusion, or at least this is what is made explicit. But of course, inclusion and diversity go beyond this, and there's religious diversity and inclusion of students with disabilities and students with a migrant background. And, you know, I know that on the one hand, you can't mention all of them, but on the other hand, you need to acknowledge that these diversities exist to prepare teachers and students and adults and everyone to tackle them. But yeah, I mean, I know I sound extremely critic, but I'm also extremely happy with the European education area as it is now. So I just see some white spots from a history teacher's point of view, and I wanted to point them out. I'm going to shut up and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A lot of interesting points, and as a historian myself, I'm very happy to have a very active European History Teacher Association. I think we should not forget about our continuum in the past, present, and future, and this is what you mentioned in your intervention. My last one on the agenda, maybe there will be more, is Sirius, who asked for an intervention.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, from the Serious Policy Network on Migrant Education. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So we welcomed very much the focus on multilingualism, inclusiveness, and the home language in the EEA statement, particularly in regards, obviously, to students with a migrant background. Also welcomed the efforts to increase inputs of teachers into policy making and decision making, and revalorize the career path, both financially and societally. We really fear for the implementation of one of the key dimensions in the EEA statement, which is the digital transition, particularly as it completely contradicts one of the other key dimensions of quality that we're looking at. We're very happy that there will be a council recommendation on how to make digital education more inclusive and engaging, and indeed look at blended learning and other things. But the reality is this does nothing to address very real issues that the transversal skills element in the quality dimension of critical thinking, entrepreneurship, civic engagement, which I think in Europe is particularly important, creativity, and out of the box sort of thinking. These things cannot be learned online as a child, particularly for children under the age of 15. And in addition, whereas some children can be supported in these efforts, for example, at age 15 and above online, we do know that unaccompanied minor students who may arrive, or other students who arrive with their families at this age, need a maximum amount of face time in order to gather the social and the community aspects of language that they need to progress in society. So I would highly recommend everyone to think a little bit about whether we can afford to push digital education without first a deeper exploration into whether it's appropriate for many vulnerable groups, not just migrant students, students with special needs, students from poorer backgrounds, before we actually kind of like go ahead and push it as a blanket statement. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this passionate intervention, sharing with us also the borders of digital and online learning. And I agree that what you mentioned about creativity, engagement, critical thinking, also social learning, it needs the interaction of people, and we should be aware that in this morning we had a chat with our Asian colleagues on online learning. Online learning somehow brings us back to a front-loaded kind of learning, and we should take care that it will be participatory and transformative as we know it in adult education from the last 30 years. I wonder if there is somebody from the panelists or from the audience to give a comment. So please raise your hands. Now there is a little bit time. There is Arja Krauchenberg who raised the hand first. Please.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, I represent the Lifelong Learning platform, but in this case, as Una has already spoken on behalf of the platform, I'd go back to my home organization, which is the European Parents Association. And I would like to mention that I also put that comment in the chat, that parenting or parental skills are in general neither recognized nor is there any training for them, very often even in adult education. So I think that the pandemic has shown that this is absolutely necessary. We need to also empower parents as they play a major role in the education of their children, but also in their own development. So I think we need to look at this from those both perspectives. And this is a point that is very, very often overlooked, which is really problematic, I think. And especially in times of COVID, we had an interesting session just now with Alice about how there is an interaction also between the home and the school. And this can only work if both sides have a certain knowledge about their shared responsibility and about what is expected from each other and what each can bring to the table in a respectful and meaningful way. Thank you.
Yes, I think we paid a certain price for not educating our parents in the last months. I agree. Now we have two more. The first is Carlo Scartoli, who raised his hand. Please, Carlo.
Yes, thank you. Just to reply to some of the issues that were raised, for instance, mentioning cooperation with other international organizations, OECD, Council of Europe, or UNESCO. We do cooperate, I would say, really on a daily basis with these organizations. For instance, we cooperate very much with OECD for the organization of the PISA tests and for other related research activities. We cooperate very closely with the Council of Europe on a number of issues, particularly related to the European higher education area and for the implementation of qualification frameworks. The Council of Europe is responsible for the qualification framework of the European higher education area, and we are responsible for the European qualification framework, which covers all levels of education and training. So we cooperate with them really very closely and very successfully, I say. And UNESCO as well, we work with them on common work, for instance, on recognition of international qualifications, on recognition of credits across countries and across world regions.
Hello? I think we lost Carlo. So I would like then to give the floor
in
to
our communication.
Back again.
We are often committing to actions, and we cannot and we cannot really commit other organizations, international organizations, to any of our actions. That's why they're not usually mentioned in our policy documents. There was also mention of a focus on STEM, scientific and technological studies. Indeed, in the skills agenda, we do mention them because we ask for their further promotion, because there is a clear need of that kind of skills. But we also promote other interventions, for instance, short courses in digital skills that might provide graduates from humanities and from fields which are maybe quite distant from STEM, and which might help develop quite quickly those skills which are most requested on the labor market. We do understand that education and training are not only about preparing people for the labor market, but we do also understand that this is one of a major function, and they should be able to satisfy this function as much as they should satisfy the need for personal development of all learners. That was my intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. The last speaker is Pete Katzi Michael. I'm sure I do not pronounce your name. Cool. Katzi Michael. Okay.
Yeah. I know I have a complicated surname. It's okay.
Like me.
Hello. Thank you very much for all the contribution statements and remarks made during today's event. My name is Pete or Panayotis. I represent LLLWeek, European Educational Exchanges Youth for Understanding. We are an organization providing school exchanges, and of course you can imagine now in during times of Corona, mobility and learning mobility specifically is quite challenged. And I think that's something that we really need to address during the development of European education area, of how do we maintain learning and how do we maintain educational outcomes despite crises that we might focus. And I think that is one of the strongest elements that the European education area can bring forward. Nevertheless, I'll choose to focus on something else from the statements done. As well, you saw my comment before about the education sectors. I think it's really, really important while developing and addressing the education area to finally break the silos between educational sectors. This happens between organizations, this happens between stakeholders, formal versus non-formal, etc. And I'm quite surprised every time I see documents, I see a reference towards teachers, towards professors, higher education, academics, yet not all of them referred to as educators. Their value, their knowledge, their background, their contribution and engagement is equally valid and important. They're not different to each other because they work in a school or they work to a higher education institute or because they work in a youth center. As educators, they have the same importance, same value, and same needs in being included and engaged. And I think it's very, very important that the education area really highlights this in this communication. Another thing I'm really happy to see as we work with schools, that teachers are becoming again focused in being engaged in policy development, because they are the ones on the ground working in the development of future citizens, of future generations, working for a more value-based community. And saying this, it's very important, as mentioned earlier, and I really appreciate that you address this issue, that we, understanding the difficulties very, very much of Corona, finances, etc., employment, yes, skills and skills development, focusing on sustainability are vital, but building, engaging citizens, it's more vital than anything else. If you yourself are excluded or don't know how to participate and engage, then you cannot participate in forming a society, a business sector, let's say, which is more socially oriented, more community-based. So I think it's very, very important that we equally promote both and not swift the focus according to what is beneficial towards the period that we think is best. And I think that's, with that, I'd like to thank you once more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pete, for this engaged and very important interventions. This is now the last opportunity to raise your hand or say something. 1, 2, 3. So if not, then I would like to thank everybody for the active participation and the very important discussion. I'm sure it will be not the last discussion about the European education area and education in Europe as a whole. And I was impressed today that from all speakers and from all different constituencies, the need for more cooperation, coherence across the sectors, across the levels of local, regional, national, European, across the topics and across the stakeholders was emphasized very much. And I would like to share with you my hope that this will become true, because my impression is that although we might agree on this today here, there are other interests and actors who might be not so interested in cooperating too much and more protecting their own silo. But if we really want to build a modern European educational space in the 21st century, with the immense challenges and the needs for transformations ahead in the next 10, 20 years, we need to work together to cooperate and to think across silos and think across borders, which were established in the traditions and in the last traditional systems. So thank you all for your participation. It was a great pleasure to be your facilitator today. Hope to see you all again, and maybe not only virtually, because it's a bit depressing, although it's nice to see some kitchens and living rooms and some green grass in the background. But it would be nice as well to see you in nature, in person. Thank you very much and have a very nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Good to see you, Tatiana. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.